The Galaxy Council called a directive absolute. 9,700 warships, drawn from 41 member species, translated out of hyperspace in a ring around a small blue world that Council cartographers had labeled, with bureaucratic contempt, Sol 3, non-signatory. Fleet Marshal Ozren Kade stood on the command deck of the flagship Sovereign Word and watched the readouts bloom green. 9,700 hulls. More firepower than had ever been assembled in the 11,000-year history of the Council. Enough to crack a planet in half if the natives proved stubborn. "They call themselves humans," said his tactical officer, a Vethari named Prax, reading from the intelligence brief. "No warp drive. No planetary shield grid. Radio signals are only 60 years old. Marshal, this isn't a war. This is a formality." Ozren allowed himself a rare smile. The Council had voted for annexation 8 months earlier, after Earth's first faster-than-light probe had drifted, unmanned and curious, into a Council trade lane and been quietly destroyed as a precaution. The vote had been unanimous. A species without a seat at the table did not get to have opinions about the furniture. "Send the ultimatum," Ozren said. "Standard Council language. Surrender terms, or we begin." 240,000 miles below, in a converted missile silo outside Colorado Springs that the Air Force still called Cheyenne Mountain out of habit, Colonel Denise Okafor read the translated ultimatum twice, and then read it a third time out loud to the room, just so everyone understood exactly how little patience the aliens had brought with them. "They're giving us 6 hours," she said. 6 hours to hand over global governance, all technological research, and I want you to hear this part, reproductive census data for resource allocation purposes. Nobody laughed. The silence in the room was the kind that came right before people started making decisions they'd remember for the rest of their lives. Dr. Priya Anand, the astrophysicist who'd spent the last 4 months trying to reverse engineer alien hyperspace telemetry from a single destroyed probe's black box, leaned over her terminal. "Colonel, I need to show you something before you answer them. Make it fast." Their ships translated in using a synchronized jump, 9,700 vessels arriving within an 11-second window. That takes precision. It also takes trust. Every ship in that formation is flying based on the assumption that every other ship is exactly where its NAV computer says it is. She pulled up a Starfield model, red dots swarming Earth like a rash. They've never fought anyone who could touch their formation integrity. Because nobody they've ever invaded had gravity manipulation. Denise looked at her. "We don't have gravity manipulation. We have Dr. Whitfield's array." Priya's smile was thin and exhausted and, underneath it, terrified. "We have 6 months of blackout research nobody in Geneva approved. We have a theory. And we have 6 hours. 90 minutes into the countdown, President Holloway addressed the nation from an undisclosed location, and for once in the history of American television, every network ran the feed unedited, uninterrupted, without a single crawl of stock prices at the bottom of the screen. 6 hours ago, an alien fleet arrived in our solar system and told us we no longer belong to ourselves," he said. "I'm not going to stand here and tell you we have the strength to beat them ship for ship. We don't. What I will tell you is that this country and this planet has never once in its history responded to give up with anything but try harder. Whatever happens tonight, it will not be surrendered. Not while there's a single American, a single human being, still willing to fight for the ground we're standing on." In the silo outside Colorado Springs, Colonel Okafor watched the broadcast end and turned back to Priya Anand. "Talk to me about this array." The theory, stripped of the mathematics that only 11 people on the planet fully understood, was elegant in the way that desperate things sometimes are. Whitfield's array, 6 repurposed gravitational wave detectors, hastily networked with a graviton resonance emitter built from salvaged fusion containment coils, couldn't destroy a starship. It couldn't even scratch one. What it could do, if the math held, was generate a localized gravitational shudder precise enough to disrupt the synchronization lock between hyperspace-capable vessels flying in tight formation. It wouldn't kill the Council fleet. It would make the ships forget where they were relative to each other, for about 4 seconds, at the exact moment 9,700 warships were sitting wingtip to wingtip in low orbit. For seconds isn't a war-winning weapon, Priya admitted. But it's not supposed to be. It's a can opener. What we do in the 4 seconds after, that's the part one can't help you with. Denise Okafor had spent 26 years in the Air Force preparing for exactly one job she'd hoped she'd never have to do. She looked at the map of every operational aircraft, missile silo, and naval vessel the United States and its allies had left uncommitted, spread across 3 tables in a room built to survive a nuclear war. Then that's the part we handle, she said. Give me every fighter wing from here to Diego Garcia. We're not fighting a war. We're running a play. The ultimatum expired at 0400 Zulu. Fleet Marshal Ozren Kade received the silence from Earth's surface exactly as expected. No surrender. No formal reply. Just a defiant scatter of encrypted military chatter his signals officers dismissed as noise. He gave the order to begin planetary suppression, expecting token resistance. A handful of primitive interceptors, some ground-based missiles that his point defense grid would swat aside without breaking formation. What he did not expect was for the sky itself to lie to him. At 0411 seconds, every gravitational sensor across 9,700 ships screamed at once. The Council fleet's formation lock, the silent, constant handshake of 9,700 navigational computers trusting each other's position, shattered. Ships that had been holding perfect geometric order for 6 hours suddenly didn't know, for 4 terrible seconds, whether the vessel beside them was 50 meters away or 5. Collision alarms across the fleet fired in a wave. Some ships were corrected in time. Most didn't. In the chaos, hull met hull at orbital velocity. Not everywhere, not catastrophically, but enough. Enough that 400 ships were crippled or destroyed by their own formation in the first 10 seconds. Friendly fire in the truest and most literal sense. And into that chaos, from airbases across 4 continents, came the humans. Not with weapons that could punch through a Council warship's shields in open battle. They had none of those. They came with saturation. 2,000 fighters, and every missile America and its allies had, launched not at the fleet as a whole, but at the wounded stragglers, the ships still fighting their own instruments, shields still down from the collision cascade, point defense grids still recalibrating. Denise Okafor's play wasn't a war-winning strategy. It was a boxer hitting a man who'd just been blindsided, over and over, before he could raise his hands. Ozren Kade watched his tactical display collapse in real time and understood, with the particular horror of a commander who has never once lost, that he was not fighting a primitive species making a token gesture of resistance. He was fighting a species that had built an entire battle plan around a 4-second window it had gambled everything to create, and had the discipline and the numbers waiting to fill that window completely. He gave the order to withdraw at 0413. It was the only order that mattered by then. 18 ships made the jump back to Council space. 18, out of 9,700, limped home carrying the wreckage of the largest military catastrophe in the Council's recorded history and a single, unbearable piece of intelligence. The non-signatory species designated Sol 3 had defeated an invasion fleet using technology it had built in secret, in 6 months, expecting exactly this. The Council convened an emergency session. The debate lasted 4 days. At the end of it, by a vote of 39-2, the Galaxy Council did something it had never done in 11,000 years for any species it had not first conquered. It sent an ambassador instead of a fleet. Colonel Denise Okafor stood beside President Holloway on the tarmac outside Colorado Springs when the Council shuttle, small, unarmed, painted the stark white of a formal peace envoy, touched down 6 weeks later. Priya Anand stood a few feet away, holding a tablet with the final casualty numbers from Whitfield's array, numbers that still didn't feel real to her no matter how many times she checked them. 9,700 ships, Holloway said quietly, watching the shuttle ramp descend. And 18 went home. They'll tell every species in that council what happened here, Denise said. That should be enough to keep the rest of them at the table instead of in our sky. Holloway nodded, and out on the tarmac, the doors of the shuttle opened, and for the first time in the history of two civilizations, an alien delegate stepped onto Earth's surface not as a conqueror, but as a guest, because 18 ships had gone home to explain, in terms no committee could dismiss, exactly what it cost to underestimate the will of a species with nothing left to lose and everything left to defend.